The Last Ride. I still remember that night vividly. It was late, around 11 p.m., and I was driving back from visiting a friend who lived out in the country. The roads were empty and dark, and the only sound was the hum of my car engine. As I drove, I saw a figure in the distance, standing by the side of the road with their thumb out. It was a hitchhiker. I hesitated at first. I had heard all the stories about how dangerous it could be to pick up strangers, but there was something in me that couldn't just drive past without stopping. Maybe it was the way they looked, tired, desperate, and a little scared. I pulled over and rolled down my window. "You need a ride?" I asked. The figure nodded and quickly got into the passenger seat. It was a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She looked cold and was shivering, despite it being a mild night. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've been out here for hours." "No problem," I replied. "Where are you headed?" "Just into town," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We drove in silence for a while. I tried to make a small talk, but she seemed distant, lost in her thoughts. I glanced over at her a few times, noticing her worn clothes and the dark circles under her eyes. Something about her seemed off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As we approached the outskirts of town, she suddenly turned to me and said, "Can you take a different route? I don't want to go through the main road." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's just, I don't want to be seen," she replied, her eyes darting nervously. Against my better judgment, I agreed and took a detour through the back roads. The further we went, the more uneasy I felt. The darkness seemed to close in around us, and the silence was almost suffocating. Finally, she pointed to an old, abandoned house at the end of a long dirt road. "You can drop me off here," she said. I was confused. "Are you sure? This place looks deserted." She nodded. "Yes, thank you. You've been very kind." As she got out of the car, she turned to me one last time and said, "Be careful on your way back. There's something out there. Something dangerous." Before I could ask her what she meant, she disappeared into the shadows. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then, with a growing sense of dread, I turned the car around and started driving back the way I came. That's when I saw it. In my rear view mirror, a figure standing in the middle of the road, watching me. It wasn't a woman. This figure was taller, with long, thin limbs and glowing eyes. I felt a surge of fear and pressed down on the accelerator, speeding away as fast as I could. As I drove, my mind raced. Who was that woman? Why was she out there alone? And what was that thing I saw? My heart pounded in my chest, and every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. I reached a small gas station on the edge of the town and pulled over, needing a moment to collect myself. The attendant looked at me with concern, as I stumbled inside. "You okay, buddy?" he asked. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. I, I picked up a hitchhiker. She asked me to take her to an old house out in the country, and then I saw something, something not human. The attendant's face went pale. "You should not have gone down that road," he said quietly. "People around here know to avoid it, especially at night." "Why?" I asked, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "That house," he said, "used to belong to a woman named Sarah. She disappeared years ago, and people say her spirit haunts those roads. And that figure you saw, some say it's the thing that took her." I felt a shiver run down my spine. But but she was real. She got into my car." The attendant shook his head. "You're not the first to say that. She appears to those she wants to warn, those who might end up like her, if they're not careful." I left the gas station, feeling more unsettled than ever. The rest of the drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the night's events over and over. I never saw the woman or the figure again, but I still can't shake the feeling that they're out there, watching and waiting. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to look up any information I could find about Sarah and the old house. I found an old newspaper article about her disappearance. It mentioned that she was last seen leaving a party late at night, trying to hitchhike home. Her friends said she seemed nervous, as if she felt someone was watching her. The article also mentioned that several people had reported strange sightings near the house over the years. Figures in the road, glowing eyes in the darkness, and an overwhelming feeling of dread. But the most chilling detail was a photograph of Sarah. She looked exactly like the woman I had picked up that night. I started having nightmares. I'd woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, pictures of the woman and the figure haunting my dreams. In one particularly vivid dream, I was back on that road, the woman in my car again. This time she turned to me with those glowing eyes, whispering, "He's coming for you."